I see. Yeah, so you can start the panel, and so let me make some introductions. So we are moving to our women leadership section, and so here is the panel moderated by Irina Berkon. So go ahead.
All right. Well, we already had a little introduction. So hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're kind of at the tail end of this conference. I think all of the kinks have been worked out, so hopefully everybody is very comfortable now. I'm joined here by two wonderful ladies who are experts in their fields. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself first. I am based in California. I'm a CPA by trade, and I do consulting CFO work. I'm also managing director of a fund called Golden Seeds. It's an angel fund, one of the 5 biggest funds in the US. And the main theme of our investments is we invest in women-led companies. And we do it at the seed level. So we're kind of the first, second money in the door for the women-founded companies. I'm going to let Barbara go next and introduce herself, and then we'll dive into some very interesting topics.
All right, and then Ada will introduce herself after myself. I'm Barbara Bickham. Thank you guys for joining this evening. I too am in California. I'm in Los Angeles, so Irina's up the road from me. But Ada's down the road. You'll find out where she's from in a minute. I do 2 things. One, I have Trail and Ventures, which is my blockchain advisory company. So we provide strategic technical advice putting companies onto blockchains. The other thing that we do here in this space is I'm the managing director and founder of the Women's Innovation Fund Accelerator. And our thesis is threefold. One, we use acceleration to help grow and scale companies. We do gender balanced C-level investing for emerging tech companies. So you have to have an equal amount of men and women at the C-level to participate in our accelerator and get our investment. And then the third thing is we work with companies to help them become sustainable, because we look at that as their next set of customers, next set of kind of partners, next set of funders. So that's me. Ada, I'll kick it over to you.
Sure, thank you. First of all, I give you a brief introduction about myself. I have a 20 years professional experience on both software engineering in Silicon Valley as well as financial services in Hong Kong. And currently I'm the founding partner of Singularity Financial. And that's a platform that we are focusing on ESG related research and reporting, data solution, and shareholder activism, communication engagements. And prior to that, I was senior vice president for a couple investment banks in Hong Kong, serving at the Hong Kong capital market in the area of equity sales and fundraising, investor relations. And prior to that, I was working in Silicon Valley as a software engineer consultant and specializing on B2B and ERP systems integration. And so let's switch to my business currently. We are based in Hong Kong, and even though I'm speaking from San Diego at the moment, what Singularity is doing is we are a leading provider of ESG and corporate governance products and services in Asia. We focus on ESG research and reporting, ESG data solutions, and shareholder activism engagements. So we build our business on 4 pillars: data, and big data, and research, advisory, and media. So based on those 4 pillars, so what we are emphasizing at this moment is we try to bring on the ESG solution to Asia, which is one of the areas that is a growing phenomenon in the whole world as the ESG investment. However, in Asia, it's very lagging behind at this moment, especially in China. And China has been singled out on every category because of its high growth, but however, it's high risk in the ESG territory. So back to you, Irina.
That's great. That's a little lead in into where I want to start our conversation. So at Golden Seeds, we are all member managed fund. So we make our own rules. Our members are involved in due diligence, in figuring out where to source companies and which ones to invest in. We do focus on women-led companies. One of our criteria is the company has to have an executive with more than 10% equity stake, and it has to be somebody who's really a leader in the company. So I want to talk about mandates and how they affect gender diversity within investors and within companies and then governments. So organizations like ours, we don't have a mandate from the government, but we have a mandate kind of from our management, which is all of us. And as such, we are bridging the gap between women being able to get funding as compared to companies run strictly by men. So maybe Barbara, you can talk about how you see this from your perspective. And we're also in California where there is a governmental mandate of women on boards. And have you had experience with that? And maybe how have you seen that evolve?
So I have a couple of points on that. First of all, our fund is also self-managed as far as how are we going about deploying powder? How are we going about sourcing deals? What deals we look at, who we accelerate. So we kind of have our own kind of self-governance. We're also a member of something called Pledge LA. And Pledge LA has a survey of all the VCs in LA. And they've taken a pledge to say, we're going to invest in underserved, underrepresented founders. And then how is that reflected in your investments? And how is that reflected in your company itself? So just because you took the pledge, you also have to look at what are you doing internally in order to make sure that that pledge is being met as well. So that's Pledge LA. As far as governmental mandates, I am familiar with the women on boards. I met the woman that actually passed that bill, which was fascinating how she got that passed. But, and there is a mandate here in California. I think by 2021, they have to have 3 women on boards. They already have to have 1 on boards. I know that they've had several kind of, I don't want to say lawsuits, but litigation around that, I believe. But I think it's a good thing. I guess we'll see. I think it's still early. It's been about a year. I know that they've made a lot of progress with the Women 2020 on boards and some other organizations I know about. So they've made some progress. And it's just a slow and steady progressive thing to do. I mean, we as funders can help effectuate that at some levels. Like, hey, if we're going to give you powder, we have to be on a board. We have to, have other people come on board. We can affect the C-level clearly. Like, these are the types of people you potentially need to hire. So there's some things from the funding side we can do, but I think they all can work in combination. I don't think it's like one magic bullet.
Yeah, so the mandate is not for every company. There is a threshold of being public and having a certain level of revenues and number of people. But what I've noticed, and this kind of came through Golden Seeds, is women are being called to boards because of this mandate, but they're also being called to boards because of their contribution on boards, and it's being valued. So what I've seen is organizations stepping up and providing training to women to make sure that they can get on boards and be valuable contributions to the boards that before either those trainings weren't available, or they weren't available to the extent that maybe women had access to them because they didn't know anyone who could train them to be on boards and be effective members. Ada, what do you see in Hong Kong? Is there such mandates that maybe you can point to, and how do they affect the companies and the gender diversity?
Well, first of all, I want to say the reason the whole ESG become a global momentum, because there's a few key areas that it tied to the gender diversity, tied to the gender issues. For example, what's the board diversity? How many women are in the executive board member? Those are the things, those are the indicators for the investor to point out for the corporations the ESG rating, especially in the ESG rating scores. So there's lots of push from Asian perspective. In Asia, as you know, it's always lagging on the ESG, especially in the gender issues. It's historical, it's always lagging. However, I mean, starting from July this year, and Hong Kong Stock Exchange has made it mandatory for all the corporation to make a public disclosure of their ESG engagement and the discussion from the board, how the ESG will impact the business. So by disclosing those numbers in a quantitative way, and it will bring the gender issues, bring a lot of executive pay issues, bring board diversity issues, bring employee engagement, the female-male ratio issue into transparency. So I think that will put a lot of pressure into the board, into the public company to conform into the ESG standards, especially in Asia. I mean, as you know, Asia always lagging behind compared to US and Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's unfortunate we don't have anyone from Europe here. It would be interesting to hear that opinion. You know, maybe next time we'll try to recruit someone. But it's interesting that you say that it's led by, you know, the bigger investment firms, because as we know, Goldman Sachs recently came out and so they said they're going to require their portfolio companies to have diverse boards or managements. You know, at Golden Seeds, I was having a conversation, and you know, we were saying we invest in high risk type companies, meaning at the seed level, it is very high risk what we're doing. You know, there's usually no product or, you know, go to market. And then somebody said, oh, is it high risk because it's women led? And the answer to that is no, it's the opposite. You know, the way I look at it is I diversify my investment, or I secure my investment by putting it in a company where, you know, statistically and historically, if there's a woman there, then my money is used in a better way. So I'd like to ask the two of you, have you seen any improvements from your maybe portfolio companies or anybody you know that, you know, look for gender diversity as part of their security of their investment?
Sure.
I'll take that one, Ada. I'll take it. I mean, that's what our whole thesis is, a part of our investment thesis. And the reason why we say we want balance is that we believe that with the power of the diverse thinking of the men and the women combined and the other types of underrepresented and underserved founders combined, you can have a very powerful return on your investment. And, you know, there are other statistics. I think the Kaufman Institute did like a big study that showed, you know, if you have at least one woman at your C-level, your company's going to be far, you know, more profitable, more ROI, more everything. So, you know, it's not just kind of Goldman Sachs. There's a lot of other statistics around having women at your C-level, at your board level. So those are kind of, you know, things that we require. And we found that, you know, in this, you know, we're in a kind of a pandemic, like that our companies are doing well because they have the female kind of other side of the thinking as well. So that, I think that's kind of helped and served them well versus kind of if we had a different kind of portfolio construction.
I want to tackle this topic in a few steps. First of all, we talk about entrepreneur, then we talk about female entrepreneur, then we talk about how female entrepreneur work in the men's world. So what's being an entrepreneur? I don't see the difference of being male and females. The main thing is how you come to narrow down your company's mission, how to narrow down your strategic planning. And that's no different being a female, male. And then the next thing is being a female entrepreneur. How can you convince your male world, your male partner, your male customer, your male suppliers, how they're going to work along your side to support you. And I think that it's gender issues that a lot of time it will come to a lot of discrimination. That's where it comes in. So that's why I see in these days, stakeholders issues might be much more important compared to shareholder issues, because how you value your stakeholder, how they're going to come in to support you and as a whole picture, and to bring the fundamental value out of your business. That's the key. And then the next thing will be how at this moment, I will see the investors, it's very short-sighted these days. No, I'm not saying, Barbara, you are, but I'm saying
No, well, I didn't take that personally.
Right.
Some investors are short-sighted, agreed.
Right. 20 years ago, I mean, most of the investors were only, the holding period for a public company maybe would be 3 to 5 years. But today, I would say less than 12 months. And that's why there's a lot of scandals and cooking the accounting books in a lot of public companies, especially in Asia. I mean, take an example of Luckin Coffee. I mean, that's one of the biggest scandal these days in China, because the company go from a business idea to IPO within 24 months. Why do that happen? Because the investors are very short-sighted. And when everyone point finger to the Luckin executive boards, I think that should be more than that. They should point finger on the whole investor community, because they are the one collude with the executive board. They are the one actually supporting them to cut the books, because they want fast money return. They want faster growth. So a company grows in 24 months and become 3 billion companies market cap. That's unusual. So that's what I'm saying. This required the whole community, whole investor community to participate, to have the mentality of how to apply the ESG standard, how to apply the gender diversity, all this ESG factor into the business in order for the business to become more healthy, more normal. That's my point.
Yeah, well, we've had on that point, Ada, we've had a few scandals at that level. Theranos, massive scandal. Uber had massive scandals. Rampant harassment, rampant other kind of things going on. And you're right, as an investor, you have to be mindful of that. You do have a duty to your, investors as well. And, you have a duty to the company. So you really have that kind of duality, and you can't always, without that other oversight, ESG or otherwise, these things can continuously run rampant. And that culture just spills out, and then you get all these kind of scandals, and you wonder, like, if there was a woman on Uber's board, do you honestly think they would have been behaving that way? Maybe and maybe not. We won't know. Yeah. Same thing on Theranos. They didn't have a female on their board either. Even though she was a female, they didn't have another female there. Yes. So that's a big issue.
Well, it's general diversity. We talk about gender diversity. There's other things we need to be looking at when it comes to the mix of who you have on your board, especially with the new technologies. We're talking blockchain, we're talking crypto. This is very new and this is very technical. So, is it right to have a certain board or executive team composition of people who don't know anything about it, or maybe don't have the knowledge to understand the risks? Which kind of brings me to another point that I want to address that we also talked about before in our group. So not all women are the same either. And I know that Barbara, in your, I don't know if it was Pledge LA or in your space, you do look at different type of women and other minorities when you look at your investments. So can we switch a little bit to that and talk about what you're seeing and how that's developing?
Well, I mean, our fund is an opportunity zone fund, so we naturally work across with underserved and underrepresented communities. We believe in going back into the local community and having them become the next generation workforce, next generation entrepreneurs, and next generation investors. So how can you do that if you don't work inside of those communities? And I work with all types of founders, I mean, and that's wonderful. And I kind of concentrate on the underrepresented because they have even a bigger, not only wealth gap, but also access to capital, funding, knowledge gap as well. So, how do you go about fostering that? And then, in underrepresented communities, what happens is they feel very alienated, isolated, because someone like them isn't funding them. And so some of that can be intimidating because their parents don't necessarily have the money to seed the company. Their parents and their family dynamic and structures can be very, very different. And they are usually very, very different. So, I mean, there are just some extra challenges. Does that make their company any less viable, any less sustainable, any less kind of, standard than any other company in a box? Probably not. I know that usually if you do a side-by-side comparison between an underrepresented founder and a normal founder, you're going to find that the underrepresented founder actually probably has better return because they had to hustle more. They didn't give up as much. They, bootstrapped the heck out of everything, so they just had a more hungry mentality. And usually, that leads to the most innovation because they are solving a super real world problem that impacts them and their community in a very deep and impactful way.
I would venture to say that maybe they also commit less fraud if they are really I don't think there's statistics, but I would say based on what Barbara is saying, and if they're really solving a problem for their community versus out there to make investors money. We've seen it at Golden Seeds. I can think of a few founders who came in and said, I'm in this to solve this problem because my mother had this problem and my sister has this problem and I'm here to solve it. So I know that my money is going to go.
I'm not saying they're not in it to make money, but what I'm saying is the problems they solve are a little bit more deep and profound to them because it impacts them more directly. That's what I'll say.
Right. But yeah, I agree. I was going there that as an investor, I do still want to make a return. It's not charity. I mean, you can do charity. That's not what our fund is about. But when we look at it, where am I going to make the safer return? Because we are in a very risky investment space. This is one of the criteria.
Ada, you have anything on that?
Well, I would say, for a business to have a long-term sustainability, it's very crucial to look at the economic moat, how you build your economic moat in order for you to be able to last longer, whether or not it's female, male entrepreneur, whether or not it's an Asian company or US company. The economic moat come into many forms, for example, like IP patents or scales or cost of switching the customers and that kind of things. But one of the very crucial things is how you intertwine with ESG risk. And that's something that I think these days more and more investor has come to realize that. That's why it become very heavy indicator when they come to making investments. And the economic moat itself, I would say, whether or not it's gender issues and that kind of things, it can be an indicator for the company culture, how you build your fundamental value, how you build your vision, how you utilize your employees or your talents. And I think from that perspective, we really need to focusing on all this material risk of investing in a big corporation or public company or private company, and how the company built their economic moat, and especially on whether or not it's on the gender issues, or it's on minority issues, or it's on stakeholder issues. I think they're all coming to one big fundamental understanding, which is the company culture itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
We're almost out of time. I want to maybe end, in case we have some female or any entrepreneur listening to us, can we maybe give them a little bit of an advice of how to go about, let's say, raising money or structuring their company in a world where they are not necessarily, they don't look like the people writing the checks. And I will start by a really quick story. You know, what I like when women do is they flip the table and show their strength as a woman and their strength as things that women do versus a weak. You know, I listened to the ex-CEO of Pepsi, who was a woman, and she gave a story about how she deals with her 2 children while, you know, she's out there in the world running his company. While the current CEO of Tesla, for example, we don't even know that he has 6 children. And, you know, that's not a thing that comes up when we think about him on the front lines of his factory. So the point is, what I would say is use it to your advantage to show how you can actually be an asset with all the skills that you have as a woman. Ada, what do you think? What would you tell entrepreneurs?
My advice is, I mean, being a leader, being a executive decision maker, it's a lonely process. Whether or not you're male or female, it is a lonely process. At the end of the day, when you make a decision, it all comes down to a probability of 50-50 success rate or not. So, I mean, I mean, as a female, we tend to forget about the gender image of ourselves. I mean, especially when you come to deal with men's words, and you're gonna have to put that aside, because if you show the weakness of yourself sitting on the negotiation table, you already put yourself down. So when you make this decision making and when you make the strategic planning, you already go through the loneliness yourself. You're already listening to all the different opinions from your staff, from your partners, from your customers. You already come to the conclusion. At the end of the day, just go for it. Because, I mean, as a female, we have an advantage being a female. We are very sensitive. We see things men don't see a lot of times. So I would say when we do the decision making, we tend to be 360 degrees. We're more, we look at things more detailed, more comprehensive. That's the advantage of being a female decision maker. That's my view.
Or superpower. So take advantage.
What do you?
Of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Barbara, what do you think?
My advice is just be authentically you. I mean, you just have to be yourself. And I'm not saying just be whatever yourself. You want to be the best version of yourself. And as an entrepreneur, as a funder, or just as a human being, we're all growing, we're all learning, we're all kind of, evolving, we're all doing things more and hopefully, getting more opportunities, open to more opportunities. So, I mean, it's important for you to be authentically you. Just be yourself, and the rest will fall in its place.
There's no one else to be you but you. That's true. Well, thank you very much for the panel, and just a little snippet that Golden Seeds is investing. We are writing checks, and we welcome our women founders and entrepreneurs who are persevering during this time to come, and we'd love to see you.
Great.
So
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies. Yeah, very interesting panel and insights. Thank you, Irina, for moderating and preparing all of this.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye here.